Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. This episode is brought to you by you. Thank you to those of you who have become patrons of the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. For less than the cost of a dive tank refill, or a cup of coffee, you can help keep the podcast episodes coming. There's also some fun bonuses for patrons, so be sure to check those out at patreon.com/marinebiolife. That's patreon.com/marinebiolife. Hello, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lubbers. Welcome to today's show. How do you know the bathroom is in use when you're at an octopus party? The sign on the door says octopied. My guest today is coral biologist and co-founder of Blue Finance, Angelique Brathwaite. Getting her start studying coral in the Caribbean put Angelique face to face with some of the most pressing issues facing our oceans today. It's through this experience that motivated Angelique to work towards protecting the oceans at the policy level through her organization, Blue Finance. Blue Finance is shaping and reframing the seascape around protected areas in the ocean. In today's episode, we chat about what it's like to be a coral reef scientist in the Caribbean and what it takes to protect the ocean. Angelique also shares some of the instrumental local outreach she's done, including putting on an ocean-themed theatrical play. She also shares a very funny dive story at the end, so stay tuned for that. Please enjoy. Angie, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. I am very excited to chat with you today.
Thanks. I'm very excited to be here. Actually, I love being a marine biologist, so I'm happy to share.
Wonderful. So I kind of want to start a little bit, not at the beginning, not at the end, somewhere kind of in the middle. You headed the marine research section of the Coastal Zone Management Unit in Barbados for over a decade. And you did a lot of research on the coral reefs down there. Could you explain what your role was exactly and some of the research that you were doing and what you were seeing on the reefs?
Yeah. Okay. So, the Coastal Zone Management Unit in Barbados is a really interesting agency. It was part of the Ministry of Environment at that time. But what we did is the marine biologists worked alongside coastal planners and alongside coastal engineers in order to manage the coast in a holistic fashion. In other words, to manage the coast and the marine ecosystem, not just looking in the sea, but also looking on land and getting the two of them to connect in the best way. My research focused really around coral reef ecosystem health. I monitored the corals to see what was going on. And I had a really big interest in coral diseases. I was the only person who was diving and actively looking for diseases and got excited if I saw a disease because it was something new and something unexplained and something that we really didn't know that much about back then. So I looked a lot at coral diseases, what different types of diseases they were, how they impacted the corals, how quickly the disease spread, and we looked at some potential causes for disease also. We dabbled a little bit in coral reef restoration because, at that time we had quite a lot of issues with boats dropping anchor on the reef. We've since solved that. We put in permanent moorings, but we had that issue. We had coastal builders who wanted to build structures in the sea, etc. And we kind of experimented with how, can we actually move corals from one location to the other and they survive.
You took established coral heads. This isn't just like little fragments that you see for restoration projects. These are like established coral heads, and you actually were able to move them to different places?
Yeah. So I'm going to say straight off that was not my focus. That was not my research. That was being done by a colleague at Coastal Zone called Andre Miller. And he started that, and we all got pulled into it. And it's because, we looked a lot at coastal planning, right? So, for example, they wanted to extend the harbor and they were dredging and they are going to kill everything in the harbor. So these things are going to die anyway. So what we did is, with the knowledge that they're going to be killed,
Hmm.
actually move them. Yeah, physically move them. You just chisel them up. And it was really funny because corals are such fragile animals, right? And we tell
Right.
people don't touch them, your fins and everything can really cause a lot of damage. And here we were with chisels and hammers, and you actually hammer them up carefully from the base, and
Hmm.
you transport them very carefully in tubs of salt water to where you want to put them, and then you cement them or use two-part epoxy to get them into place. So we started this really before all the coral reef restoration work that is actually looking at growing them. And I mean, this is not something. There are lots of issues with it. It
Of
worked.
course.
We were able to
Of
monitor
course.
them, but for only 5 years afterwards. I don't know what they look like now. I don't know if they're long-lasting impacts. And the other problem was is that coastal developers are then wait, hold on, you can move these corals. So that means, look, I'm going to put my stuff here and you could just move the coral from one place to the next.
Mm.
So which is obviously not what we wanted. We wanted for you not to kill the corals in the first place. So there are a lot of issues with it, but yeah, we were able to do it and show that it worked for at least 5 years. I don't know if those corals actually reproduced. We didn't look at that, and that's also very
Hmm.
important. But yeah, we were able to do interesting work like that. A huge part of my job that I never envisioned. I mean, when I studied marine biology, I didn't think I'd have to talk to fishers and divers and owners of chicken farms and pig farms. I didn't think about public awareness and how important it is for everyone to know the importance of corals, what harms them, how their actions have an impact, and how we can create solutions. So a huge part of my job was actually public awareness. And I mean, I guess I'm lucky because I'm also a dive instructor, so I can talk the language of divers. And I'm also a dancer and involved in theater. So in all things, I try to bring the arts in because you need arts, I think, to bring the message alive. And so people aren't aware that they're learning. You don't want to stick them in a classroom and pound them with information. You want the information to kind of dance its way into their minds and bodies and get them to change the way that they are acting. So photography, visual arts, books, TV.
I mean, we see a lot of photography. I mean, a picture is worth a thousand words, and art
Yeah.
is a very, very powerful tool. I'm very curious about your theater work, though. Were you like putting on plays about coral reefs? Like, what did that look like?
Yes. Oh, those were such fun. Oh my word, they were such fun. First one we did was called The Sea, and that's just Bajan dialect. And we did it with school kids. So we went in and we spoke to the kids about the issues and what we're doing, and we actually developed the production with them. And they did everything. They helped us with everything. We had like bolts of cloth in blues and greens to simulate the sea. We worked with a sculptor, a known sculptor and artist in Barbados, Omawali Stewart, and they helped to create the sea animals, and it was amazing because they were learning and having fun. And then we put on the production. And we've done others with adults also. And, I always work with the producers and the directors and explain the message I want to get across. And then we craft the story together. And then at the end of each production, we always have, discussion with the audience. And, this is where you really get to the meat of the matter. And this is where, I'm so happy because from the questions that are being asked, that they really get it. And that if they continue to be stimulated, the audience, they will get out there and help you do something. I had an amazing boss. I mean, I can't think of many bosses at that time, in those times, that would have allowed me, to put on a theatrical product. I mean, come on, we're a scientific institution. We were working with engineers and planners, and you want to do a dance? Are you mad? This is not. And I have to shout him out because his name is Leonard Nurse, Dr. Leonard Nurse. He was the director of Coastal Zone at that time, and he was, broad enough in vision and range to allow me to, use all of these quirky, different ways of educating the public.
That's wonderful. I really love that because the public does get more involved that way rather than like sit down and just listen to a lecture. And also, you really get other stakeholders, like you mentioned, the producers involved, and really getting their perspective on how best to interpret things. And I think they get a better understanding of why it's so important too. So, really, you're just involving a lot of different facets of walks of life into that by incorporating theater. I love that. Such a cool story.
Thanks.
You mentioned part of your job was to study coral diseases, and you were kind of the only one doing it. Why did you want to study the diseases? Were the reefs, you were starting to see a little bit of a decline in the reefs, and you noticed black band kind of cropping up?
Yeah, I wasn't the only one doing it. So there weren't many people doing it,
Okay.
but I was not the only one. But it was something new that was cropping up. And honestly, I was looking for a master's thesis, and I was looking for something that wasn't very well known. And it's kind of, it's not blam in your face, like the
Mm-hmm.
impact of nutrients that cause macroalgae to grow, and a decline in herbivorous fish. Those are boom, you can see it. But diseases are quite insidious. Yes, if you have a nice big a nice big piece of black band, not nice, you have black band disease, for example. That is something that's quite visible. But I mean, what my research showed was that the disease on the reefs it was quite small. It was like 10%, but it was everywhere. And that's also something that's important. In fact, I think the things that you don't see so often, or that are not so big, those are the ones that are perhaps the most dangerous, because you tend to ignore them. There's been a lot of work done on disease, and my part of it was small. I was just recording, measuring, and monitoring disease. The other part of that coin is in the labs, to
Mm-hmm.
actually look at these microbes and see why they're spinning out of control, why they're being destructive, and how we can minimize. And they still don't know a lot about diseases. And there's a new one that cropped up this year: stony hard coral tissue loss. The new disease that they found. I hope I'm not going off topic.
I was going
Um,
to ask you, could you explain kind of the two diseases? Black band is really descriptive in that there's a huge black band kind of around the affected area on the coral. But could you
right.
explain a little bit more about
The
black band and a little bit more about the new disease as well?
Okay, so the diseases we found back in the day, there was black band disease, white plague, white band disease, which
Mhm.
really destroyed most of the acroporids that we had. And the acroporids are really, really important for small island developing states, because they're the ones that protect mainly against high energy waves. And I think most people know that corals are really important in dissipating wave energy. And the specific corals that did a lot of that were acroporids. So we've already seen the impact of disease on our reefs. Black band, it's a black band of microbes in there, and they're basically killing the coral as they move along. Most of them act as bands. This new one, stony hard coral tissue loss, and I'm not an expert on this one. It cropped up like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
This is different from the ones we had before, because the ones we had before tended to affect one species, like white band, or even if they affected a lot, it was like 5 or 6 different species, like black band. But this new one is affecting everything. It is progressing really, really quickly, and it is wreaking havoc on reefs from Florida all the way down through the Caribbean. And they still don't know what causes it. But I mean, just instinctively, and even back in the day, of course, we're going to link it back to nutrients from sewage and or fertilizer or
Hmm.
human impact in some way. But it's apparently very, very, and I'm not a microbiologist, it's very, very difficult to actually isolate the pathogens. And that's a whole other branch. And I would say more difficult branch than mine. Like I said, I was just involved in documenting and measuring the impact of the disease. But to really do something about it, you have to understand the disease and understand what's causing it, and then try and minimize that.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I mean, you definitely had the more glamorous job, though. Coral reefs.
For sure, for sure. I used to go to work in a bikini, and my friends used to swear I wasn't working. But I was working very hard. And anyone who works in the water knows that it takes a lot out of you. It's fun. It's where I wanted to be. I would advise anybody to study this if you love the sea. But it's not all fun and games. But
Yeah, I joke about that a lot, and that was one of the reasons why I started the podcast, because people do, they see you going to work with like a dive tank, and like they're like, oh man, I want to do that. But at the end of the day, after you've been in the water for 12 hours, the viz may have not have been great. You probably got stung by a
correct.
couple of things, and you're like, are you sure? Like this isn't that glamorous.
You hit that nail on the head. But I love it, and I
Yes.
would say you have to love it. And this is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. If you love the sea, it's kind of like a natural fit.
Yes.
I love
Mhm.
corals. I'm a coral reef ecologist. You could focus on fish. You could be an oceanographer. You could work in the lab. You could be a microbiologist. There's so
Mhm.
many different. You can work with people and be a social scientist, or
Mhm.
you could be interested in valuing marine ecosystems and be an economist, an environmental economist. There are lots of different jobs and lots of different little facets of marine biology that you can get involved in if you love water.
Absolutely. Which brings me to one of my questions. What inspired you to become a marine biologist? I mean, you grew up in Barbados, island nation. It does seem like a perfect fit.
Actually not. Like most of the people in Barbados and most Caribbean people can't swim. It's crazy, we have this saying, the sea has no back door. So there's a natural fear of the ocean. So I was honestly a little bit unusual in that I swam, and I'm giving all the credit to my dad. Dad grew up in a seaside town called Pennyhole, which in Barbados context is back a bush. It's like in the middle of nowhere. And he learned how to swim. And when my brother and I were very small, Daddy taught us how to swim. And then he was also a lecturer at the university. He taught biology. When it was time for me to choose what job I wanted to do, Daddy had actually suggested it as something that I might be interested in. And
Hmm.
then I went to a career showcase, and the marine biologist drove up on a motorcycle, and I love motorcycles. So I followed him to see, what he was doing. He was doing marine biology. I was like, well, here, this is it. But I had a love of the sea from a very young age, and that's I'm comfortable in the sea. I have a very healthy respect for it. But that is, I would say, 100% due to my dad.
That's amazing. Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemuzia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make. Yeah, I did see that you had a quote that the fact that increasing numbers of children are in the Caribbean are learning to swim gives you hope that that'll kindle their
Yes.
interest in marine conservation. And it's true because you protect what you love, right? And if you're afraid of the ocean, it's really hard to get on the bandwagon of protecting it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there is so many. I have to say, I have to shout out the government of Barbados, the National Sports Council of Barbados right now, National Sports Council, National Conservation Commission, and the Ministry of Blue Economy right now have come together. and they are embarking on training young children how to swim. And I mean, I could not be happier. It's not just the joy of it, losing your fear, less cases of drowning, hopefully, but there are a multitude of jobs ranging from being boat captains to, dive instructors to, there's so many jobs,
Right.
that are closed to a lot of Caribbean children, people, because they have this fear of the sea. So I want to shout out the government of Barbados for that initiative. Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, that's really great. So you decided you want to become a marine biologist based on you were comfortable in the ocean and you saw one roll up on a motorcycle. So, which I
I
love.
was good at biology too.
When these three things combine, we have a marine biologist. So you knew when you went to school that you wanted to study marine biology. What made you choose corals?
Let's see. Yeah, when I went to university, and shout out to Mona in Jamaica, they were fabulous. That's where I did my first degree. I just liked coral reefs and everything around it. You know what? I don't know what made corals
Mm.
click for me. I never thought about it, actually. I just, the fish are cool, they're cute and all that, and they move about, they get in all the way. They're very important for reefs. I don't know. I don't know. The corals, you had to look a little harder to see their beauty. And to me, they're a little bit more
Mhm.
complex than fish. And yeah, my marine biology friends and I are always arguing about which are better, fish or corals. But it's a dumb argument. I'll give you that. But we do it anyway. I just find that corals are amazingly complex. I mean, they're these tiny organisms. Most of them are just a few millimeters that collectively form, I think they're the largest biogenic. Biogenic is a structure that's generated by animals. The largest biogenic structures on the planet. I mean, it's amazing. They form colonies and they share everything. They share food. They have a very simple nervous system. They share that. They're just amazing little organisms. I find them more interesting than fish. That yeah, I can't really say why. Sorry.
No, you found them interesting. That's all it is. They are beautiful and fascinating. It's funny when you go on dives, a lot of people are always looking out. I think it's shifting a little bit nowadays, but a lot of people look for the big stuff, right? They look for the big fish, they look for the turtles, dolphins, they look for the big animals, sharks. But if it's in the coral where a lot of things hide, and if you slow down and get a little closer and look, there's so much in there. Even just watching the corals themselves is pretty entertaining.
Yeah, yeah, I find, and it depends on when you go. I mean, I'd been a marine biologist for many years, and then decided I can't call myself a marine biologist if I don't see corals spawn. So you know how corals reproduce? Some corals annually, they time it by the moon, and they eject all the eggs and the sperm into the water column, and it's an amazing event. And then, of course, with all that protein in the water, all the other fish and organisms come around to feed, and I'd never seen it. It's like a plume coming out. And if you're close enough and you're careful, you can actually see the egg bundles. So these little gelatinous bundles just being ejected from each polyp and coming out.
Mm.
And there's so many of them. It's amazing. And as part of that, we were diving at night. I think usually when you dive at night, well, I don't know. I just never saw all these things before when I dived at night. But we're diving at night looking to see if we could find coral spawning. And I mean, we saw some amazing things. Like we saw the corals, lashing out their tentacles and things that I had never seen before. And I think, that's what makes this job so interesting, because you think you know everything. You think you know a lot because you've been on this reef a gazillion times, and then you just come one day and you see something that just freaks your head, So that was a bunch of different stories in one, but anyway, you get the idea. Watching coral spawn is amazing, and
Absolutely.
whenever you go dive in, you never know what you're going to see.
It's true. It's very true. You never know. So you have your degree and you worked for the Coastal Zone Management. What made you transition into your current role at Blue Finance? And could you explain a little bit what Blue Finance is and does?
Yeah, I worked for the government for 18 years, and I was looking at, and I love my job. But I was looking at, what else I could do. And we had decided that we wanted to extend the marine protected areas that we had in Barbados. And I was lead on that. And we were getting ready to designate a pretty large swath of marine space as a marine protected area.
When you say marine protected area, does that mean it's a complete take zone, or are there certain concessions for local fishermen to come in? What does that mean for marine protected area?
Yeah, that's a really good question because most people don't ask it. So, yeah, when you say MPA, it covers all of them. But in a small island context like Barbados, there's no way that you're going to keep fishers out completely. I think
Right.
most people know that fishing is part of the problem, but fish is also an excellent source of protein and it's deep in our culture, so nobody's going to give up eating fish. The idea is just to do it in a sustainable fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was to have some areas and to design this with the stakeholders, not only the fishers, but the divers, the jet ski guys, the boaters, the swimmers. Have like a total plan so that each user is comfortable in the space. Fishing is just one of them. So the idea with fishing is to have maybe one or two areas that were no take zones, no fishing allowed, but in the rest of the protected area, you could fish sustainably. So for example, if you have a fish pot, you must have a biodegradable panel. None of this has come to fruition as yet. Huh? I'm just saying what the ideas were at the time. But we actually prefer to call it a marine management area because
Mm-hmm.
it's too much of like you can't, and people always find a way to. So it was trying to work with the different stakeholders and different communities to find solutions that they were comfortable with. Everybody would have to give up something, but it's not just the fishers giving up fishing, to have a management space. But marine, I'm going to just call them collectively marine protected areas, but they take a lot of money out. It takes a lot of money. You
Yeah.
need to have boats. You need to have people to educate. You need to have people to enforce. You need to have signage so people know what's going on. You need to have permanent moorings so people don't go in and drop their anchors. You need to have demarcation moorings so you can say, okay, this area is no fishing and this area is this fishing. Swimmers are allowed in here. Motorboats are not allowed in here. So it's quite a lot of signage. Also, you're going to be collecting user fees like parks on land, this park on the sea. How are you going to do that? Who's going to do that? What system are you going to use? It takes money and you need good people. And we did not have that. We still don't within the government of Barbados. We had said, okay, we're going to designate this area. We got the area. And then I went to a meeting, International Coral Reef Initiative, ICRI. And I heard Nicholas Pascal giving a talk about financing conservation and financing MPAs, and he had this really good idea about NGOs. So not just government managing it by itself, and governments often have shifting priorities, don't have enough people, etc. His idea
Mm-hmm.
was for a consortium of local NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to co-manage alongside government. And these NGOs would find the funding to manage it. So it would be complementary. And then he was also looking at different funding sources. So not just grants, but also looking at impact investment. So when I heard this and he was looking for pilot sites, and my hand was up before he finished speaking, I was like, oh, over here, Barbados. So once I had completed, I had taken the designation of the marine management area in Barbados to where I could, which culminated with writing the cabinet paper and getting that sent off. Then I resigned from Coastal Zone Management Unit and I went to work with Blue Finance because one of the big issues for conservation is money. We are ecologists and we are mainly scientists. We don't know anything about impact investment or financing conservation because that's not where our heads are,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But it's needed. Everywhere you look, it's needed. You need to have money to finance these things. And this is what Blue Finance does. Blue
Mm-hmm.
Finance looks at finding that money so that the MPAs can run efficiently and effectively, as well as providing the technical expertise where it is needed. Everywhere is not the same. Some people need marine biology expertise, we can provide that. Some people need MPA, specifically MPA, user fee management. We can provide that. So we look at what you need or what the MPA needs, and we provide the technical expertise. They all need entrepreneurial training because again, this
Oh.
is not what we do. And yeah, so that's Blue Finance. So it was a natural fit for me, and I love it. I never, like I said, I never thought about money. I've actually finding the financing to do this. So it's been extremely interesting. Yeah.
So, what is your role exactly within Blue Finance? Like, what does your, I'm sure your day to day varies wildly, but maybe your week to week or just kind of general roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, no, it doesn't vary wild. Well, I'm also working on a PhD, so I've kind of weaving that that through everything that is happening. But I'm now based in France and not in Barbados. Um,
Hmm.
we tend to work on the project sites remotely from France. You just need a laptop, and then we actually visit the project sites periodically. Okay, so right now, for example, we have a project that is ongoing in the Philippines. And my title, my official title is Caribbean Director, but I don't really do much directing. My focus is still management and ecology. So as part of our financing strategy, okay, we combine grants and impact investment. Impact investment is, I guess, a relatively new sort of invest in system where they're not only looking at the financial impact, but they're also looking at social impact and environmental impact. So it's not like your traditional investors that just want a return on their investment, right? You have to also show
Hmm.
social and environmental impacts. So in order to show these impacts, you have to be able to monitor and measure them.
Hmm.
So my primary role, I mean, we look over the entire NPAs and decide what is required, what is not. But within that, they have something called key performance indicators. And these key performance indicators are important for the impact investors because these are what they look at to determine if they're having the impact or not. Actually designing those KPIs with each project site. That is the primary thing that I work on and that I do. But of course, also speaking to all the Marines, the stakeholders who are involved in the MPA, and actually designing the work plans and the MPA plans for management. So that's what I do primarily. And then we have some fun side jobs, looking at virtual reality and trying to bring that all in to, the ways in which you can educate people. And then, of course, obviously, public education is another area that I work on quite a lot.
You wear many different hats.
They're all sea hats.
There you go. All C hats. Could you explain what key performance indicators you are specifically looking at are for and how they may change over different MPAs?
There's some things that are general. So, for example, one of your indicators could be the number of herbivorous fish or fish that feed on algae.
Like parrotfish.
Yeah, like parrotfish. And too
Mhm.
much algae on reefs is it's pretty bad. It smothers corals, it prevents recruits from settling, and it also harbors disease, we believe. One indicator is the number of herbivorous fish. For us in the Caribbean, parrotfish is primary indicator. So one KPI might be percentage abundance of parrotfish, right? So this is
Mhm.
you would have to monitor so you have X biomass of parrotfish this year, and then we're expecting with a well-managed MPA that biomass will go up. So that's like one indicator that you will track over time. Percentage abundance of hard coral, for example.
Mhm.
This is one that you probably, because of an MPA, are not going to see like a wild increase like you would see in parrotfish. Corals grow very slowly, and there are a lot of factors sometimes outside the proximity of the MPA from land, nutrients coming down from land that you might not be able to control, but it should be a part of your work plan. But things like percentage increase in hard coral cover is another indicator you might look at. Percentage increase or percentage change in macroalgal cover. In the Caribbean, again, percentage increase in diadema. Diadema are these urchins, black urchins, and they were some primary herbivores in the Caribbean before they got killed out by
Mhm.
yet another disease. So we
Mm-hmm.
want them to come back. Some of the things that you do in an MPA might be to encourage the diadema to come back. So that's another thing. So though, and these things will change based on where you are. So for example, if you're in the Pacific, they have a huge issue with the crown of thorns starfish, which we don't have in the Caribbean. That probably might be one of your key performance indicators if one of the things you're doing in your MPA is removals of COTS. As actually, on that note, one of the other indicators for the Caribbean is the invasive lionfish, because that made its way into our waters from the Pacific. And in our waters, it's a supreme predator, it eats everything. Really high fecundity. It is crazy. So one of the indicators, one of the things that you do in an MPA, and everybody should be doing it anyway, is trying to get rid and eliminate these gorgeous fish. So that would be another key performance indicator depending on where you are. So that sort of thing. Did I fully answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation of what kind of some of the metrics that you look for to see to gauge how the MPA is doing under your management.
Right. Well, it's not so much a performance. Well, it is a performance indicator, but it's something called a MET, and it actually tracks the effectiveness of your MPA using some of these indicators. So this is like pulling it all together, and it's really
Mm,
important. And I'm so sorry I forgot to mention it, because there's so many MPAs around the world that we call paper parks, because they're really pretty on paper. The plans are very impressive, but in actuality, no one is doing anything, right? It's not
mm,
enough to just designate the MPA and say, yeah, I reached that 30% goal. It's actually a way to show that your MPA is effective. It's actually doing something. So there are different ways of tracking it, and the one we use is called the MET, METT, and this is a way of showing that your MPA is reaching its targets and its goals as you said it would, or as you hoped it was, or as the money that you're putting into it is doing.
so, could you explain what MET stands for and a little bit how you use it to make sure that you're on track with these different MPAs?
MET is short for Management Effectiveness Tracking Tool, and that is exactly what it does. It works using a scoring system. So you would score the same indicators or some of the same indicators. It depends on where you are, but you would use the same KPIs or key performance indicators within a MET, and you will score periodically. It depends on the MPA, it depends on where you are, maybe once a quarter, maybe once a year. But you will score yourself on how these indicators have changed over time. So in the end, you end up with a number, one number or five different numbers that you can track. You can look from year to year and see, or quarter to quarter, and see if those numbers are increasing. So you are equating it to a number,
Okay.
right? So for example, if you're looking at threats, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the threats could maybe be agriculture. And agriculture is a good one because that is something coming from land and not actually within the protected area. You could put the outputs of agriculture coming into the marine protected area. And if that impact is expected to be high, medium, low, or not applicable here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you will
Right.
rate it depending on what that impact is. And then you could also have another one that looks at resource use and harm, resource use fishing, how much fishing, how many fishers do we have? So a plan for your MPA might be, for example, to retrain fishers to be tour guides, for example, or something else so that they're not fishing in this specific area. So the number of fishers within the MPA, not within the MPA, but the number of fishers that exist within the area, for example, could be another indicator.
Mm. Okay. So, a few different metrics that you're looking at. A rough estimate, how many MPAs do you manage or help to manage around the world?
So we have a pipeline of about 12 projects
Okay.
that we are assisting with, and they are in different stages. So in some of them, we've actually, signed co-management agreements with the governments, and we're working through that. And others are not yet signed, and we're working through that process with them. So
Amazing.
at the moment, there are 12 NPAs that we are working with.
So, how this process kind of works to just get the ball rolling, you co-manage with the government, so it's liaising with the local governments
It,
and also with impact investors. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about what an impact investor is. It's not somebody that just is looking to get money out of their investment, but also looking at their overall impact, whether it's environmental or societal. Who typically is an impact investor? Are these foundations or like local stakeholders, or are these just philanthropists found worldwide that just have an interest in MPAs?
right. So you would need to talk to a financier about that and not me. Remember, I'm just a marine ecologist, but I can tell you
I'm just
that
a marine
the impact investors that we're working with, they're named Althelia Morova, and they're
ecologist.
managing the Sustainable Ocean Fund. So it's actually a little funny because the Sustainable Ocean Fund is has been created by development banks. So USAID, for example, EIB, the European Investment Bank, these development banks have actually put together a fund that is used for impact investment.
Okay, so you work with a specific foundation or fund that people have already funneled money into to fund projects like this. It's not like you are trying to go out and find different stakeholders or partners for your specific projects.
Well, I mean, we're still looking.
Okay.
We're still looking. The
Okay.
Sustainable Ocean Fund is great, but there's no reason why, it should only be one. And the other thing is that while impact investment is great, I've really come from a place of thinking investors are the baddies to really seeing some good work done, from investments in marine ecosystems and so on. It is a loan. It is not a grant. It is a loan. So we
Mm,
kind of have to get our mindsets around having to repay. What we do is we tend to blend it with grants.
okay.
Okay. The idea is that you don't want to rely on a grant to manage your MPA. That's what we tend to do traditionally.
Right.
And grants, I mean, you don't know if you're going to get the next one, right? So it's quite difficult to have long-term sustainable planning relying on grants. And the other side of the coin with impact investment is that you have to pay back and you have to pay back with interest. So the
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that if you can blend that finance so that you have impact investment and you also have grants, then the interest rate on the impact investment part will be less, right? So you blend it. It's not just one. You use a variety of
Yeah.
financing mechanisms to get the money that you need for the MPA.
Okay. So what are some methods that you employ to pay back? Does the MPA
Yeah.
eventually make money? It's in some capacity?
Yes, MPAs can make money. And I mean, it's almost crazy to think they couldn't. Well, not crazy because when you look around the place, MPA is always looking for money, but MPAs can generate a lot of money. And it's done via user fees. So when I say a lot, I mean nobody's going to get rich from an MPA. I mean no investor is going to get rich, from investing in an MPA, but they can get their money back, right? So if for MPAs you're charged user fees, and divers know this because divers are always paying a user fee to enter a marine protected area, and it's just like a terrestrial park. You come into a
Mm-hmm.
terrestrial park, it's a public space, you pay a fee. That money really should go back into maintaining that public park. You come into this protected area, you pay your user fee, and it is that money that is primarily channeled then back in to the management and conservation of that space. And some of that money will go back to pay the loan also. In some cases, that's not going to be enough. So we're looking at other revenue streams. So, for example, having a visitor center, but not the old boring visitor centers where you go and you piece of newspaper tacked on a wall or whatever. We're looking at, integrating virtual reality and 360 and really exciting things so that two things. One, people will come in and pay again
Right.
for this, and that money is channeled back also into marine conservation. But two, people who don't want to get wet, people who might come on a cruise ship for, a couple of hours, locals who are still a little bit afraid of the sea and are not quite sure. All these people can still come in, and the visitor center could be the first step to broadening their awareness and appreciation of the marine environment. Things like that, making the underwater area I don't want to say more beautiful because nothing could be more beautiful than a reef, but I mean, putting things in like sunken ships and make them interesting and exciting so divers can go off there on the water trail so you can learn as you go. Those are some of the tourist related mechanisms we're looking at. Non-tourist related mechanisms are things like introducing, the one I'm looking at is something called a payment for ecosystem service, where the marine stakeholders who benefit from the services provided by coral reefs, for example, hoteliers, whose hotels are usually in front of beaches, and those beaches are there courtesy of a coral reef,
Hmm.
that these will actually assist in paying for the conservation of that reef because it is delivering the ecosystem service that allows them to generate their money. So
Okay.
it's just a system of generating, how much, what is the value of what you're receiving here, and what are you willing to pay? What conservation methods or management measures can be put in place here? Yeah, we're looking at a variety of financing mechanisms to get money back in there.
Amazing. That is such amazing work. And it's really important. I mean, obviously, we talk a lot about MPAs in the marine conservation world and how wonderful they are. But yeah, the big ugly truth is that they do cost money. And it's good to know that there are ways for them to also produce revenue and to be sustainable rather than just putting a landmark on a map and saying this is protected and then there's no actual teeth to it.
Exactly. One I heard one gentleman say, and I'm sorry that I can't remember his name, but he says you can't be green if you're in the red. And
Mm,
he's entirely true. You cannot really do good conservation work if you don't have the money to do it.
yeah, that makes sense. So I want to shift back a little bit to your story. So going from Barbados to France to do your PhD, why, that's quite the leap. Why? Why leave the Caribbean?
Well, I came to France for personal reasons,
There you go.
and while here, the opportunity to do this PhD basically fell into my lap, and it's interesting because I can combine the ecology part of my work, the management part of my work, and this newfound financing interest into one study. So it's actually been very, very interesting.
So what exactly is your PhD then? What is your thesis?
So I'm looking at financing mechanisms for marine conservation. That should come as no surprise to anyone. I
Right.
started off looking at all the different ecosystem services provided by coral reefs and how they could be financed. And eventually, I've kind of whittled it down to one ecosystem service, which is coastal protection. And I think this is one that most people have not looked at. Many people have looked at, things surrounding coral reef aesthetics, tourists coming in and paying to see
Mhm.
big whales and dolphin and corals and so on, but not coastal protection, which is it's a very complex ecosystem service. And it's very important, especially for small island developing states, and especially with global climate change, where we're expecting there's going to be sea level rise and flooding and so on. So I'm looking at that, and I am looking at payment for ecosystem services for coastal protection, if it's feasible, if it's not feasible, and if it is, then what actually should be paid, what mechanism should be set up to do so. So that is the core of what I'm looking at.
Amazing. So I mean this ties into your hotel paying for the ecosystem services that the coral reef provides. This is exactly what that is, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Awesome. So, a couple things before we wind up for the day. One of my very favorite questions to ask is what is your favorite field story or stories to tell? And this could be like the most magical day ever on the coral reef, and it's just something that you love to share, or it's like, a day in the field where things went wrong and it's a really great story now, but at the time you were kind of in it.
Field stories.
Maybe I should modify that. What's your favorite ocean story or stories to tell? It doesn't have to be work related.
Okay. So one of my favorite stories in Barbados, it's kind of sad though, but anyway, in Barbados we used to have we have this pretty deep wreck called the Nikita, and we used to have this huge barracuda. We named him George, and he lived well, he lived in and around this Tabanakita. So every time he did the dive, you saw him. And when I was a new diver and I heard about George and I was so excited about it, and we went down on one dive and we saw George, but I saw two barracudas. I saw two huge barracudas, and it looked like, one was mirroring the other. So I thought it was a mating dance or something. It was just absolutely amazing. I was also narked. That's my excuse. Nitrogen narcosis. When you dive and you go past a certain depth, for most
Yeah.
people that's like 100 feet, but for me it was 80 feet. I got narked really easily. Your perception of thing changes. It's as if you're a little drunk, a little tipsy. That's it. It just has to do with the amount of nitrogen in your blood at the time. And when you go into shallower water, it goes away.
Usually during deep diver training, your instructors try to intentionally get you narked so you know what it feels like, so that you're under supervision the first
Ye-
time it happens.
Yep. But that's actually another funny story, because when I was doing my dive training, the way that they checked it was for you to do a problem, a mathematical problem, and I'm
Yeah.
notoriously bad at maths. But anyway, you do it on the surface and then you do it down at like 100 feet. So I did it on the surface and I got it wrong. And then down at 120 feet, we did it and I got it right. So the instructor was cracking up, he was saying, maybe you need to come down here and work out all of your issues. But getting back to George, so we had gone down and I saw these two amazingly beautiful barracudas mirroring each other's movements. And I'm here thinking now this is a mating dance, and I'm so excited. And we come back off the dive and I can hear him rip off my gear. I thought, did you see those two barracudas? Did you see their dance? And my partner he laughed so hard he fell off the boat. I will never forget it. What is going on? And he came back, and when he came back out, he's laughing. He said, Angie, that was one barracuda and a bubble, an air bubble. So many divers go down and the air bubbles coalesce and it forms
Ah.
like what looks like one. So it was like a mirror. So it was George and his reflection, and that is why one was mirroring the other. Yeah, that's the funniest story
And
I
that
could.
explains nitrogen narcosis really well.
Well, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
think
so
it
funny.
actually does. I think it does,
That's a
sure.
great story, though.
Yeah, and
I
then
feel like
spearfishers
there's
killed George and ate him after that. Can you imagine?
oh, that's sad.
But they got ciguatera poisoning, so I mean, it was kind of some poetic justice. It
Okay,
was
I was
happening.
gonna say, usually barracuda, especially that size, have ciguatera, so that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, he certainly did.
So, at the end of each episode, I leave the audience with an ask to go forth and do, and you have a really wonderful one. So, what would you like the audience to go do?
I would really like everyone to get in the sea, put on a mask and a snorkel. You don't have to put on a tank if you don't want to, but at least a mask and a snorkel, and just immerse yourself and go and see coral reefs. I mean, there are some of the most amazing ecosystems you'll come across. Television is doing a fantastic job of bringing it into your living room, but it's a completely different sensation to actually submerge yourself and have a look. So I'm asking everyone, if you can't swim, please learn how to swim. Put on a mask and a snorkel. And once you do that, get a dive tank or start free diving and just, immerse yourself. You will love it.
It's a wonderful ask. It's true. There's nothing like actually being immersed in a reef. It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, it really is.
If the audience wants to find you, connect with you, learn more about you and or Blue Finance, where's the best place to do so?
You can go to our Blue Finances page, which is www.blue-finance.org, or you can email me. That's absolutely fine. My email address is cxseaeggz@gmail.com. And I also manage a Facebook page that's called Marine Management Areas Barbados, and I tend to put a lot of information there. And you can also find me on Facebook under my full name, Angelique Brathwaite. So, however, but yeah, I'm always happy to talk about the work I'm doing and the work I should be doing. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And I'll put a link to all of that in the show notes for our listeners for this episode. This was
Okay.
a lot of fun
Thank you.
chatting with you today, Angie. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for inviting me. As I'm sure you notice, I love talking about my work. So, yeah, anytime.
Hey, one more thing. Do you want to dive more into the ocean and marine biology? Need a little guidance on ocean conservation? Head on over to marinebio.life/resources. We've got book recommendations, job posting pages, conference suggestions, and ocean friendly products. All recommendations have been personally vetted by me, and I will continue to add to the collection as I come across cool things to share. Head on over to marinebio.life/resources to learn more. See you over there. Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and, of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. One person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.